heard this beautiful analogy by Kathy Heller recently, and she talks about, your job is to be resonant, just like I have a piano in my house, right? And if I'm singing a certain note, the string will vibrate without me having to touch the piano. And it's, being able to be receptive to that vibration is when stuff really starts to happen. So your job is to feel your feelings so that they are clean and clear to be receptive to
Yeah.
anything that's coming your way, because in the world of energy, there's only so much our five senses can experience. And again, this is also affirmed by all the neuroscientists. This there's so much more. And so when you start to lean in, anything's possible for you.
Folks, this week's guest is my friend Jen Rafferty, educator and author. From the height of her music teaching career and being a new author to having her world turn upside down with a divorce right before the global pandemic, how did Jen navigate this tumultuous chapter in her life? This is a story of resilience, grit, and resonance. You'll definitely want to tune in to hear Jen's story. Let's cue the intro. Welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast, the show that empowers you to live an enriching life physically, mentally, and spiritually. I am your host, Benjamin Ye, and I created this podcast to give you perspectives on how to strengthen your mindset so that you can build optimal health, create aligned wealth, and connect with your higher self. It's all interconnected. Let's get to work. Hi, folks. Welcome back to episode 81 of the Boom Vision Podcast. I'm happy to share today's interview with my friend Jen Rafferty, educator and author. I've had the pleasure of connecting with Jen last year through our mutual friend Brooke Young, where I was a guest on Jen's podcast show called Take Notes. After catching up with Jen a few months ago, I felt it was timely for her to share her story with our Boom Vision community. As a brief background, educator and author Jen Rafferty started her career as a middle school music teacher for 15 years in central New York. She is known for bringing her energy, humor, and expertise to her work while advocating to create empowering learning environments. In 2021, she founded Empowered Educator, a groundbreaking platform dedicated to providing educators with the tools, resources, and community they need to thrive in their profession. Empowered Educator has become a leading force in transformative professional development, reaching thousands of educators worldwide. Her innovative strategies has been featured in Authority Magazine, Medium, Thrive Global, Wellness Voice, Best Holistic Life, and was on the TEDx stage with her talk, Generational Change Begins with Empowered Teachers. She is also the host of the podcast Take Notes with Jen Rafferty, which is rated in the top 2.5% of podcasts globally. Jen is a certified emotional intelligence practitioner and is a doctoral candidate in the field of educational psychology. Jen's insatiable curiosity continues to make the Empowered Educator programs relevant and reflective of the most up-to-date research in mindset, leadership, and cognitive neuroscience. She is committed to inspiring teachers and school leaders to discover their voice and maintain a healthy longevity throughout their careers. So without further ado, here's Jen. Jen Rafferty, welcome to the Boom Vision Podcast. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And I'm so glad that it was Brooke that reconnected us. And I'd love Jen to just dive right in. Can you share your origin story of where did it all start for you and what's led to the path that you're currently taking right now?
Mm. So that is a very wide path, but I will be as concise as possible. I think the best place to start would probably be December of 2019. I was feeling like I was at the height of my career. I was a music teacher. I loved being a music teacher. I, at the time, was presenting nationally about general music classes and adolescent cognitive development, actually, and how to be a responsive middle school music teacher. I was conducting honors choirs all across New York State, and I had just published my book for music teachers. And I was super excited to go on the university tour and talk about my book and do the professional development thing. And about 2 weeks after the book was published, that month, right before Christmas, my husband and I decided we were going to get a divorce. And I moved out of my house the same weekend the world shut down in March of 2020 with my kids, who were 5 and 7 at the time. So that was a really big weekend for me.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a lot. And of course, just like everyone else, I had to be in isolation, and I was very much in isolation with all of my feelings about everything. Singing itself, I don't know if you remember, was very dangerous at the time. So there was this moment of, who am I? All the things I thought that I was the day before, I wasn't, so I thought I wasn't the next day. And I really had to have a reckoning about that. So there was a lot of deep diving into who I was and who I wanted to be. I decided to take off what I thought would just be a semester of school that fall to homeschool my kids. I started my PhD in educational psychology and really went on my own healing journey, dove more into the research about cognitive neuroscience like I had been doing already, and realized, oh, right, I have a brain too. And I learned more about my own brain and paired that with emotional intelligence. And when the time came to decide whether or not I wanted to go back to teaching, I decided, there was something else. There was this inner calling that was just saying, there's something more, there's something else, Jen. And I resigned from my teaching job. I felt amazing about it. And then 4 days later, I'm a hot, sobby mess on my couch thinking, what did I just do? I have 2 kids to feed, and now I'm a single mom. And I took a leap of faith in myself, and Empowered Educator was born. And now I serve teachers, school leaders, school communities, and focus on the social emotional well-being of all of the adults in schools, really using all of the tools that led me through that time of deep healing, and that I continue to use today.
So, Jen, you mentioned just now that there was a certain moment where you felt that your life had like a higher calling.
Hmm.
It feels like your life was meant for more in the midst of turmoil, it feels like, in terms of what's happening around you. Can you walk me through what was the mental, emotional state of what led to you to start taking that first step?
So the knowing and the doing were different moments. And that's, I think, really important, because I think so many of us know deep down what's up.
Mm,
I think that we tend to ignore that part of us because it's not tangible, and it's not something that we often consider as dinner table conversation. Like, let's talk about my inner feelings and my deepest callings that are intimate to me. This is not something that we tend to talk about casually with people. It doesn't feel safe. And
yeah.
so we mute that dialogue even with ourselves. And so if we're really listening, that knowing is there, and getting quiet enough to do that. And for me, it was kind of a complete explode or implosion of my life that led me to get quiet enough to really listen. And the doing part was very different. I remember talking to a friend of mine in that time period, and he owned several businesses over the course of his life. And we were talking about him, and he said, I just really like to build things. And it was that moment where I was like, I really like to build things. I've actually built lots of things. I built really successful things, both in school and out of school. And I can do this. I can build this. And the next morning, Empowered Educator flew out of my fingertips onto my keyboard, and it really hasn't changed all that much since. It was almost as if a channel had been opened where I just kind of got rid of all of the muck that was there of my own expectations and other people's expectations of me, and the shoulds and supposed tos, and nothing was there anymore. So it was clear. And Empowered Educator was born, and I opened up my computer. That was the doing.
Okay, so what I got from that when I feel the energy of that, Jen, is that the event that helped you cross over from knowing to doing, part of that catalyst was because you were able to be open in connecting with a friend and understanding that, wow, okay, if he's a doer, I can be a doer too, because I can create. And it feels like who you surround yourself, your inner circle, to be able to share the thoughts, the ideas, really has a tremendous impact in terms of allowing you to see like what's possible.
Yes. So I want to say yes and I want to do the
Yeah.
and first, and then I'll go
Yeah.
back to that. The and is the emotional expression, and that emotional release had to happen first.
Hmm.
Because I was in isolation, because it was COVID, I had no way to distract myself from my feelings. There was not any time, I had planned post-divorce, I was going to go down to Miami to visit my sister, and I was going to like relive my 20s. That like never happened. And so I was home alone with my feelings. And so that excavation needed to happen in order for me to even be available for that kind of a conversation, that I would have heard it in that way. And
Hmm.
that's an important piece. I think so often, we zhuzh down these emotions and we do this emotional bypass because it doesn't feel good. And our brain is pain averse. We don't want to feel the pain. But in that suppression, we are quite literally blocking ourselves from other potentials and possibilities. And so that part needed to come first. So I felt called to share that first. And then yes, that community that you surround yourself with. What is it? They say that you're kind of like this amalgamation of the top five people you hang out with, right?
Right, right.
So, who are you hanging out with? Are they expanders, or are they the people who are keeping you safe and in your same stories? And this is consciously or unconsciously, parents in particular see you as the role that you play in their family. They might not be the expander for you. So finding people who are going to create space for you to see what's possible, not just for you, but through them, is an essential piece of that growth and expansion for sure.
Yeah. What I would say on my show is in terms of the garden that you are surrounding yourself and rooting in yourself, are you growing seeds or growing weeds? Because there's growth in either way, but one really can nourish your energy, one can really deplete it. And it's how do you mindfully cultivate that, which is the people that you surround yourself with, because their thoughts, their sounds, their vibrations will really impact you from acting or not acting. Right?
100%. So, with that healing journey for myself, I was fortunate enough to come upon an incredible group of women who were also doing this work, many of whom are entrepreneurs themselves. And so, yeah, I got to see firsthand, oh, well, she could do it. I could do it too. Oh, she navigated her way through processing this big divorce. I could do that. Oh, she just wrote a book. I could do that. She built this multi-million-dollar company. She's no different than me. I can do that too.
Mm.
And then things started to become possible.
Yeah. Jen, I'm noticing something about you. I want to go a little bit deeper in that there's a certain level of self-confidence one I feel needs to have to enable them to jumping from knowing to doing. And I feel just the energy level of who you are is you had that innate self-confidence. I want to know, how did you build that throughout your lifetime? Because if I take a step back and zoom out on things that you just shared, there are some pretty major tectonic shifts underneath you that has happened in such a short period of time. But it feels like what it allows you to kind of not just keep things together, but allow you to move forward and progress, I feel is to your credit on the level of self-confidence you built up until that moment. And so I'd love to kind of hear, like, how did you build that inner self-confidence, that grit to be able to maneuver that?
It's a great question. I knew this was going to be juicy when you said, I'm noticing something about you, Jen. Something in my body just shifted, and you definitely hit on something for me. I can give you the answer that I think, and I think I'll give you the answer that I know to be true.
Mm.
I've had this my whole life. That's the truth of it. This is something that I've had my entire life, that I've known about myself and that other people have known about me. And it was cultivated by my parents and the people that I surrounded myself with.
Mm.
I grew up wanting to be on the stage. I was a theater girl from the second I was born. And this the story goes, I'm setting up my stuffed animals in the living room when I was 2 to give the performance, and I that was cultivated for me. And being in that world is also not a given that you're going to have that self-confidence, because performing can be tricky. I've just recently unpacked this idea of, when I was performing, I would consistently give my self-worth over to the hands of my audience, right? I mean, did they like it? Did they clap? Did they clap loud enough? Was there a standing ovation tonight? Because there was one yesterday. Well, what does that mean about me if they didn't clap loud enough, or no one was standing in the audience tonight? And there was a piece of that consistency and perseverance that I for some reason never penetrated to my core,
Mm.
even though I was navigating maybe some of those feelings, because even through college, I studied music. I was music education and vocal performance major. So we had to re-audition to be in the program every semester. I mean, is a lot, but it never got through to my core of who I was. And I think that's innate. I don't know how I can explain that otherwise. I know
Mm.
I help guide people to find it for themselves now, but this was something I've always identified with.
Yeah, I felt that. Honestly,
Mm.
I'm feeling it right now. I feel it's one of your innate superpowers that was gifted in this lifetime that you have, you know? And I love the fact that the work you're doing now is to empower people to bring that element coming from the core, not from coming from externality, because otherwise you're always going to be vulnerable to the external response of what it is that you're doing. That might be tied to this innate feeling of self-worth, but if it just feels like for you, because it came from the core. I'm curious, you mentioned of how you empower others now. What is one thing one can do to help them reshift the belief that, yeah, self-confidence can come from within, doesn't have to necessarily come from external validation? Because that's a really tricky feeling to switch over when you're so used to the externalities, especially now with like when I look at the kids are going through right now, and back then, we just went outside. We didn't have a phone to look at and things, and it's just a different ball game, I feel now in this current generation versus when we grew up. But I'm just curious, going back to what would be one advice you can impart for people to help fill their inner well of self-confidence?
It's a great question. And I I feel like I'm saying this and for all of your questions, because when you ask something, it brings up something else. I want to also make something clear before I answer this one, is that this innate self-confidence also created a version of me that was fiercely independent,
Mhm.
that felt as if I don't actually need anybody to do what I want to do in this world, which I know now is simply not true.
Mm.
And so there's always learning, there's always a journey. No matter what you might feel is innate in you, there's a path of lessons. And if you're listening and paying attention, you get to learn them. And hopefully, you get to learn them over and over and over again until one day, we leave this earth. But I want to make that clear too, that, it's not, okay, I had this innate sense of self-confidence and I got a free pass. There are definitely adaptive behaviors that have grown and stemmed from that. I was not immune to any of that either.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
knowing what I know now and what I practice myself to continue to center myself and to teach others to find that within is a connection to their body. We have gotten so disconnected from our physical self that we live pretty consistently from the neck up. We're just constantly
Mm.
in our head. And, the world banks on us being disconnected from our bodies. So, they can sell us stuff and we can consistently feel as if we're not enough and we can't trust our instincts. And we disassociate for lots of reasons, trauma, big T trauma, little T trauma. And adaptive behaviors. But at the end of the day, coming back to yourself, your home is one of the most powerful things you can do to actually remember who you are. It's this becoming and remembering process that happens.
Mm.
And it has to start with that reconnection to yourself, to your body.
Yeah. And I want to add another layer to what you just shared because I love that progression of knowing to remember who you are. And I think also another lap in that journey is once you are able to remember who you are, do you give yourself the permission to feel that?
Yeah.
Because, when I think about what you shared in during the pandemic, you're locked down with your kids and like you're in your house and you have these feelings you're still processing by allowing yourself to feel it rather than numb it, rather than preoccupying yourself with activities or other things what you can avoid the pain. Well, no, there is some gain to pain if you allow yourself to feel, but in a safe space. Do you create that environment for yourself in that safe space? And it feels like you've had that training to do so. But allowing you to feel gets you one, I feel, a step closer to that clarity to start feeling that inner well.
Yes. Well, and the feeling happens in the body. I think we
Yeah.
tend to have this very cognitive understanding of feelings and it stops
Mm.
there. But again, that cognition ends at your brain, and that's not where the feelings live. The
Yeah.
feelings happen in the body, thoughts happen in the mind, feelings happen in the body. So that you're 100% correct. Continuing to come back to body
Yeah.
is coming back to the feeling because that's where they are, and creating that safety in feeling anything. You can't
Mm.
just cherry pick the feelings you want to feel. I mean, that would be nice, right? But
Right.
I don't know about you, but I was brought up in households, and I was lucky there was no big T trauma where I grew up, but still
Mm.
there was not a safe space for me to feel as if I could be anything except happy and pleasant and content. That
Oh.
there was no space for anger
Mm.
or sadness or frustration without it being, let's fix it right now because we need you
Yeah.
to feel better with
Right.
the best intentions. But I never learned how to feel any of that.
Mm.
And your capacity to feel joy, freedom, bliss, love, excitement really depends on your ability to lean in and feel things like resentment and depression and grief and rage. That's part of the whole beautiful human experience, is this continuum of emotions. And when we deny that part of ourselves that doesn't feel good, we're actually denying all of it.
Yeah. Jen, and another thing I notice about you, and I love the words you use because I could feel the energy behind it, is you live in a paradigm of and rather than or. It's very apparent when I listen to you talk. Where did you pick that up from? Because by allowing yourself to live in a world of and, the feeling and the image I'm getting right now is like you're really going with the flow of possibilities rather than feeling life has to only be a certain way because you allow new possibilities come in when you live in a world of and I'd love to know like what inspired you to live that way because that's a very beautiful space to be in.
Thank you. It is. And I wish I could tell you there's one thing, but it was the whole journey. I mean, I could look at all of these books back here, and there's one on my floor right now. I'm I'm reading A New Earth. Have you read this one yet?
No, but
Oh,
Eckhart Tolle,
okay.
I mean, he's
Stick
he's
that one on the list.
phenomenal.
This one's blowing my mind. But if you're in the literature and you're in the research and you're in the work, that is where the possibility lives, because or is ego, or is I'm right, you're wrong. And I'm not available for that anymore. That's not the world that I want to live in. That's not the world that I want to grow. That's not the world that I want to see for not just myself, but for my kids. I want to see a world of ands, because that's how we get most connected again back to self. There is no
Yeah.
or. We live in this fantastic place of limitless possibility, and or creates limitations that again I'm just not available for.
Mm, I love it. Jen, I'm curious, do you find throughout your life certain events happen where it sort of sparked your spiritual journey, or was that sort of like embedded in your family culture early on in life?
It was definitely not embedded in my family culture.
Okay, so tell me more. Tell me more.
It definitely was not. I think actually being involved in theater so much when I was a kid
Mm,
really sparked all of this because and later on, in college when I was singing, when you put yourself into a character or when the character becomes, kind of this layer that you wear, you get to explore and embody different everything, right? Different ways of walking, different posture, different ways of speaking, different articulation, different accents, different emotional responses,
mm,
different motivations. And so playing with all of these allowed me to realize that there was more than just me and my experience in this world. I actually got to explore what it could maybe be like being someone else and then taking off that character and trying on another one and creating art in that way, particularly with singing and the quite literal vibrations of that happening is a very spiritual experience. At least it is for me.
mm.
And so there was always this, again, knowing that there's something else. And what's been so interesting to me is going down kind of this mindset work. It has a tendency to get woo-woo very fast.
Mm,
And I'm totally down for that. Like, yeah, let's go.
mm.
Let's try all the things. Let's do it. And at the same time, I am very much interested in neuroscience. And what's been so fascinating to me is that the neuroscientists and the folks over here on this woo-woo side are saying the exact same things.
Yeah.
They're saying the exact same things. And I remember reading particularly Jill Bolte Taylor's book, My Stroke of Insight, based on her TEDx talk. Highly recommend if you haven't seen the TED Talk or read the book, read it. And she had written this chapter, and in it, I remember it was like 11 o'clock at night. My kids were asleep. I was very much invested and involved in the mindset work. And I'm reading this book by this neuroscientist, and she said, "We are all just figments of our own imagination." And I started weeping, Ben. And
Mm.
it was this moment of incredible clarity. Like, wait, it's true. This is true. And if that's true, well, now what? Anything's possible then.
Yeah.
And I remember I like went into both of my children's rooms and I like looked at them weeping. And I mean, it was such a moment for me of knowing and acknowledging and like affirmation that spirituality is humanity, that they're not separate. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And what does that mean in everyday life? What do we get to do with that knowledge now is really exciting for me.
Yeah, I 1000% of what you said because I think for me, when I reflect on my life, previously being very left brain, very logic based, very seeing is believing, show me the proof and data, then I'll believe it paradigm. I feel that when I allow myself to be curious and open to understanding spirituality, I then started understanding the concept of believing is seeing, allowing the possibilities of, wow, using logic alone, I may still reach this same roadblock, but how do I almost jump dimensions to be able to like zoom out, really? And it requires me to just understand things as energy rather than just seeing things as black and white and just evidence-based. Because there's so much the more I go down this rabbit hole, the more I realize I don't know. But it allows me to be curious.
Isn't that exciting? I mean,
It
that's where all the
is.
good stuff is. That's where all the stuff you don't know is where all the cool stuff is.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And there's no end, it's infinite, that space. And your job, I heard this beautiful analogy by Kathy Heller recently, and she talks about, your job is to be resonant, just like I have a piano in my house, right? And if I'm singing a certain note, the string will vibrate without me having to touch the piano. And it's, being able to be receptive to that vibration is when stuff really starts to happen. So your job is to feel your feelings so that they are clean and clear to be receptive to
Yeah.
anything that's coming your way, because in the world of energy, there's only so much our five senses can experience. And again, this is also affirmed by all the neuroscientists. This there's so much more. And so when you start to lean in, anything's possible for you.
Yeah. Oh man, I love that. Okay, so let's go down that rabbit hole because I love that you brought that up because when you're able to sing and the strings are picking up on that vibration, understanding this concept that we're energy actually allow me to have a better understanding of what it means to attract your reality rather than chase after it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you have to be the vibrational match of what it is that you truly want. And that vibrational match has to come from your core. Being able to express the singing can touch something very, no, an opposite end of the room without physically touching it, but you're touching it vibrationally.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that our thoughts, what we say, all have a certain frequency and vibration. It's like, I didn't understand this before, but the more I understand that concept, the more I start living into it. Oh, I can attract it if I know how to raise my vibration internally for that. And
Yeah.
so what you shared reminds me of this concept too, because it's you have to sort of lay down that basic foundation before people can really understand truly how is it that I can attract rather than chase. Because I feel like staying just on a logic base, you have more of a chase sort of like motion than it is really attracting. And the key is you got to start feeling because feeling is what allows movement and energy to start move within you, right?
Yeah. 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 Well, your emotions are a frequency too. Like that's what it is. We're looking for congruence, right? So if you in that very chase logic base, first of all, it's exhausting. It's exhausting. And you might get the thing, but you're really actually chasing the feeling. So then you keep chasing the next thing. And so when you start to feel first and align your thoughts, your actions, your language, the beliefs that you believe about yourself and the world to what it is that you think is possible, that's when it starts to come. Because, even just the other day, I was working with a group of teachers who was like, yes, I really want to speak up and use my voice. And she was getting into a space where she was like, and then this can happen, and then I can really make some change. But, what I say really doesn't matter anyway.
Ooh,
And so there was this moment of like, here I am. Here's this. I mean, you can even just say in me repeating the story, right? Like you felt this
yeah,
uplifting of this vibration, and then all of a sudden, but it really doesn't matter anyway. Boom, then we drop to the ground, and that's not going to attract the results that she's looking for.
yeah.
And this isn't positivity bypass either.
Mm,
And that's part of this also. I think when a lot of people get into this work, we think like high vibes only, and we totally judge down anything that doesn't feel high vibe. That's not how you get here. You
right.
get here by getting that clean and clear body, by feeling through your feelings for as long as they need to be felt.
Yeah,
Because crying, this is another thing, we made such meaning about being angry or being sad, and being vulnerable is weak, and crying means that we can't handle it. But crying is just a release of unprocessed emotions. That's it. The only reason why it means something is because we say it means something. And
yeah,
so if you're able to bring neutrality to, okay, my body needs to release right now, and the way that it needs to release is through my eyes. Okay, now we're done. Well, now what? And there's so much agency in the now what that we just forget. We forget who we are, and we forget how much power we have to shift our energetics and go after the things that we want by creating that open vessel that we can be.
yeah. Yeah, and I would just add to that if you don't know what we're talking about, please go see Inside Out.
Yes. And Inside Out 2 is coming out. Is it out already?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
oh, it
coming
is.
out too, so I can't wait
Oh,
to
yes.
watch the second one. But I remember watching the first movie, I was like, wow, someone, I mean, you've got to really understand spirituality, understand just the emotions of it. And it's a beautiful way of just saying there's space for all those emotions. There's space for all those feelings to feel because it's part of just that fluidity of allowing things rather than just being, again, it goes back to and rather than or.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the best things about being human is this
Yeah.
incredible, range of emotions that we have. Even before we started recording, we were talking about, adolescence. I have a 12-year-old son, and oh my gosh, the emotions that are being experienced in this house. It's, a very large continuum, sometimes by the hour. But it's beautiful. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what this is. That's what it is. So can we just lean in and create safety around that? I mean, that's really what this is. It's creating safety around the feeling of the things
Yeah.
so we can go do what we want to do.
Mm.
Safe.
So, Jen, tell me a little more about Empowered Educator. What is it, and how do you serve your audience, which it sounds like it's mainly educators?
Yes. So we serve school communities, which include not only teachers and administrators and paraprofessionals, but also office staff and also parents. Because what we feel right now is there's so much focus on social emotional well-being of our kids, and that's wonderful. Obviously, we want our kids to be able to thrive, but we're leapfrogging over the needs of the adults who are holding space and setting examples for these kids, and they don't have the skills themselves. My now 9-year-old, up until very recently, when she was angry, the whole neighborhood knew. And so when you get to a certain age, you're just expected to know how to do the emotion thing. And
Mm,
most of us just never were taught any of this. And now, especially as parents or as educators, we are teaching kids either explicitly or by being models ourselves.
mm,
And Empowered Educator goes in and really gives the information about the neurobiology of you, understanding that you are the one in the driver's seat of your life, going through, this creating safety in your body of self-regulation and reminding people who they are. They
mm,
are not victims of their own life, reminding them of their own self-worth. Because at the end of the day, if we want our kids to know their self-worth, we need to know ours. And since everybody has to go to school, that's why we're working with teachers, because we are creating transformational generational change, and it has to start with the adults in these spaces.
yeah. So I'm curious in the work that you've done, because it sounds like it was sparked during the pandemic, right?
Mhm.
So since in the last 4 years, what have you seen has been either the biggest obstacle for folks to overcome in this work that you do right now?
It's remembering their self-worth. That has been
Mm,
the biggest obstacle, because we hear, first of all, teachers are leaving the profession in droves. Teacher retention is a very serious issue right now. And they want more resources, they want more money, they want more respect, they want, all sorts of really big important things. And yes, I agree with all of it. And if you're in a position where you feel that you're not worthy enough to take a bathroom break throughout the day, you're not getting a raise. If we really think, oh, well, I need to be grading papers on every single moment that I have off, we're not getting the respect that you want. I mean, because you don't have it for yourself. And so
mm,
what we do is we really flip the script and remind people that this sense of helplessness has been learned and it can be unlearned. And the reason why you got into this profession in the first place, this noble profession, there's still a place for that. And we need you. You have the most important job in the world. You are raising our kids. And in order for you to get what you want, just like what we were talking about this whole entire time, you need to be a receptor and be resonant with what you're actually asking for. And it's all clogged up with all of the obligations and expectations and the initiative whiplash that teachers have and the huge piles of things on everybody's plate. What we're doing is we are creating more capacity on the plate for them to manage whatever it is that they need to do.
Man, I want to give you as much energy and in your vision and pursuing that because it's funny. Literally last night, I remember I forgot which platform I was on, but I was just scrolling and I came across this quote that was shared by the creator of Peanuts. I think it was Charles Schwartz. And it says something to effect of like, if I were to ask you the last five people that won the the Nobel Prize or the last five movies that won an Oscar or the last five people that won the Olympics or whatever it is, chances are someone might get 1 out of 10 of that answer. But if I were to ask you, what was the last person or teacher that really had the biggest impact in your life? You're going to immediately remember who that was, what grade, and what they did for you. And the intention of what this was sharing is that no matter if you're chasing achievements or accolade, whatever it may be, chances are you'll have that flash of impact, but I don't know if people will necessarily will remember that. Versus the people that truly impact your life, that means something for you, that has a very lasting impact and influence in your life. And the fact that you are sharing with educators, for me, going back to what you're saying about it being a very noble profession, I wholeheartedly agree because I do remember who I had the most impact in my life in the teachers that are. And so I was like, when I saw that, I was like, this is probably preparing me for my interview with Jen tomorrow. I let
Yeah, it
intuition
is.
follow, and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
good one. So,
Yes, it's all synchronous, right? And
yeah.
the world that I want is for teachers to remember that, yes, this is a noble profession, and that doesn't mean you need to be a martyr.
Mm,
That you can serve more deeply with more love when you remember who you are and to take care of yourself. What the
yeah.
foundation of what we do here is the most generous thing you can do for your students is take care of yourself.
Yeah.
And that's radical in education right now. But that's the truth.
Yeah.
And so I'm sticking to it. And we're getting school communities to come on board and remember how important their people are so that
Yeah.
we can continue to serve.
So the download I'm getting as I'm listening to you, Jen, is that I mean you probably have heard the analogy where, if you're flying and all of a sudden the masks drop down, right? You're supposed to put the mask on yourself first before you put it on your loved ones, right? Because if you're out of consciousness, you can't really help your loved ones. But the image I got when I heard you just speak is, and it goes back to your analogy before about vibration. Your well and how full it is will consciously or subconsciously impact the people and the students around you. So if you're really operating from an empty tank, from an empty well, no matter what you're saying, does it have the essence and power and energy behind it? You've got to be able to at least fill your well first before that, because people just being in your vibration is going to feel that knowingly or not knowingly.
100%. We all resonate and vibrate. And as a teacher, as a parent, as the adults, as the person in the room, you're co-regulating with everybody in that space. And so if you are coming from a place of low frequency, of that low vibe, you're going to continue to get more of the same, and your students will feel that. And yes, you can fake it till you make it till a certain point. But I was just on a call recently with somebody who shared that they faked it till they made it, and then they had a cardiac episode.
Oh,
And so why do we have to wait for something like that to happen? I mean, I have lost track of the amount of teachers and principals and administrators who have told me they are now on, high blood pressure medicine and anti-anxiety medicine, particularly in the last 4 years. And it's not sustainable.
yeah,
And that frequency that we're talking about
yeah,
can come from a different place. I'm not knocking medicine. I mean, take the medicine when you need the medicine, and there is more.
yeah.
There's more for you if you want to go down this path where you remember that you are in the driver's seat. You don't have
Mm,
to, muddle through. Someone described for me just recently too. It's like every day I'm just taking punches, taking punches, taking punches. Well,
mm,
life is lifey, and we get to decide, well, are they punches or is this just life? And what are you going to do about it? How are we going to meet the moment? But we're never taught the skills of how to do this. We're just kind of thrown out, and it's trial by fire. I feel like I've stumbled on something and I've figured something out, so I want to share it.
yeah. There's one thing I want to add to what I just said too, is that this is not my quote. This was, I believe, from Chris Do, where he said that rather than framing it as you mentioned it, what was the phrase you said? It was fake it till you make it. Rather than that, because that vibration to me feels lower. So
Yeah.
the phrase he came up with was believe it until you achieve it.
Right, which isn't faking.
Right.
And that's the thing. And I think people have this idea of, well, I'm just gonna fake it till you make it. Your kids see right through that. You
Yeah.
can't fake a vibration.
Right.
Like that C on my piano isn't gonna vibrate if it's faking it.
Yeah.
And so the believing
Yes.
it, that's kind of maybe even a whole separate conversation about, how do we get from knowing this and feeling it to actually
Mhm.
believing it? Because that comes with an identity shift,
Yeah.
right? The person that's sitting here right now, it's having this conversation with you is not the same person that even I was maybe a year ago when we spoke to each other last on my podcast, right? I mean, and
Yeah.
I certainly wasn't the same person than I was 2 years before that.
Right.
And so that identity shift happened because the beliefs about myself and about the world also needed to shift.
Yeah.
If I thought that success, the way that I thought about success was for other people, there'd be no way that I'd be sitting here right now telling you about this company that I have, being in Forbes 2 weeks ago and on the TEDx stage last year. There's no way, because I wouldn't have believed that it was possible.
Mm.
But having that shift in what is available to you and then creating safety in your system to believe that for you in your body, in your cells, that you can hold all of that. Well, now I play this game of how good can it get? Like what else? What
Mm.
else is available? And that's fun. That's where I want to be.
Yeah. Oh man, Jen, I feel like I could jam with you for hours here. But I want to
Same.
also be respectful of time. So, two more questions I'd like to ask you, Jen.
Sure.
The question I always ask my guests is if the DeLorean was real and you could travel back in time and share something with your younger self,
Mm.
how far back would you go? And what would be the message you would want to share with your younger self?
It's a great question. I will be honest with you. I go back and visit my little girl quite often. And there have been beautiful moments that we've shared and healed and have taken her along with me. But the age and the time that always keeps coming back is, I was 6 years old and I was crying about something on my bed. And I go back to her often and I sit next to her and I hold her little hand and I tell her I love her. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel whatever it is you need to feel. You are enough exactly how you are. And I can't wait to show you what we get to do in this life.
Mm, man, I feel that. And I feel that the fact that you do that often is such a beautiful habit
Mm,
because I feel it's a testament to how full that self-confidence that you have that's allowed you to create the magic that you do right now.
thank you. Yeah. Yeah. That my little girl is an important piece of, I mean, I know this is just an audio thing, but I have a picture of myself, my little girl right here on my desk that I have all the time. And I get to remind her that we did it, and that's a really powerful exercise that I am very connected to her
Yeah.
and my 85-year-old self who's done it all already.
I see these three powerful women just holding hands,
All right, we're holding hands. That's
and
I've
it's
got my
just,
team. We talked about the people you hang out with the most.
yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Jen, so last question is where can our audience find you?
Great question too. So the easiest place is my website, empowerededucator.com. There's all sorts of really fun free resources on there. If you click the resource page, I'm pretty active on Instagram, which is Jen Rafferty _, and you can come hang out with us on Facebook at the Empowered Educator Faculty Room.
Beautiful. And I'll include everything, your information in the show notes, so it'll be easy for our audience to find you.
Fantastic.
Jen, thank you so much for sharing this space with me today, the resonance and energy. I love your energy and essence. I love your mission and the path that you are paving for really a very much needed space. And the support that you're giving them is just not only is it honorable, but there needs to be more light to it. And the fact that you're leading the way is a beautiful thing. And
Thank you.
so I just wanted to say thank you so much for all that you do. Whatever I can do to amplify your light, please let me know.
Thank you. I
And
appreciate that.
thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you do in this world. It's always a pleasure to talk with you, Ben.
I hope you enjoyed this interview with Jen. I really appreciated Jen's authenticity and her way of being. If there's a quote I can share that is inspired from what I learned from today's interview, it's this: One looks back with appreciation to the brilliant teachers, but with gratitude to those who touched our human feelings. The curriculum is so much necessary raw material, but warmth is the vital element for the growing plant and for the soul of the child. This quote was by Carl Jung. Feel free to share this episode with someone you feel can be inspired by Jen's story. If you haven't already, I invite you to hit that subscribe button to this Boom Vision podcast if you are ready to thrive together, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Until next time, folks, be kind to yourself. Be in the light. Be you. Thank you so much for tuning in to my Boom Vision podcast. If you'd like to find out more about me and this podcast, head over to benjaminyeh.com. That's spelled BenjaminYeh.com. If you haven't already, click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.